Asparagus is a common item at any grocery store. The vegetable makes for a great side dish or a healthy snack. And while normal asparagus usually retails for $2 or $3 a bunch, there's a rarer variety that's sold for a much higher price.
I recently paid $252 for an 11-pound case of white asparagus from the Loire Valley, and then had to basically give it away because 2 days later, the order came down that the restaurants were closed, right? I couldn't return it, so I mean, that was an enormous amount of money for me.
That's Carrie Nahabedian, a Michelin-starred and James Beard Award-winning chef based out of Chicago. Nahabedian is the co-owner and executive chef of Brindy, a French fine dining restaurant, and Costali, a contemporary take on European African cuisine. Brindy is temporarily closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so some high-end perishable ingredients, including the several bunches of pricey asparagus, all had to go.
I got to tell you, I just was starting to give it away, and, I sat there looking at it going, what am I going to do with this? Because it's specialized. I can't just give it to a food bank and say, here, just take it, because everyone I gave it to was like, how do I cook this? So I was like, okay, I'll email you instructions.
Succeeding in food hospitality is a tough business. Small margins, shifting trends, and long hours are just some of the common stressors facing restaurateurs. As a fine dining chef, Nahabedian is always on the lookout for new exotic ingredients brought to her by purveyors. But as a chef and business owner, she says it can sometimes be tough for customers to understand the hefty price tag for luxury ingredients.
Wagyu and all the Kobe beef and a different type of high-end Japanese beef. At the end of the day, it's really delicious, but I think there's only a certain market where it can go to, and it should be a one-bite kind of thing. But I don't see a server going to a table and trying to tell the average American that this 4-ounce piece of meat is going to cost them $250, and it's going to fly.
Nahabedian points out that the price for some items isn't justified. A good example is the current trendy infusion of CBD into food products.
They can charge whatever they want because it's the new hot thing. It's the new miracle drug. I saw at the store the other day here in Florida, blueberry honey with CBD. So I looked at it because I was looking to buy some honey, but I just looked at it just to see what it was all about. And I turned over it. It was $45. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Really?
CBD is purported to have several benefits, from pain relief to anti-anxiety properties. But is the price high because of the production cost or because it's new to the market? For many of the ingredients Nahabedian uses, she often justifies the cost by the number of hours needed to create, harvest, and ship the niche product.
I do know that in Armenia, a jar of rose petal marmalade has 400 roses in 1 pound of marmalade. So 400 roses had to be picked by hand and processed and cooked and then put into a jar. So how much would you pay for that? Is $12 too much or is $12 too little? So that's the dilemma when you deal with rare and luxury ingredients.
But sometimes this mentality gets lost in translation among certain diners.
When you have to explain to a guest, oh, it's prosciutto, they look at it, oh, it's ham. Not everyone understands that this pig ate acorns for 8 months and that it was dry cured and air dried, and just every bit of loving tenderness went into it. And then they just eat it and go, oh, yeah, it's just ham.
While the cost of acorn-infused prosciutto can be justified, not every ingredient, no matter how delicious, can make the menu.
I recently was offered Charente melons from France. Charente melons are so fragrant, they're so beautiful, and the purveyor thought I was ordering them, so he sent me 6 melons. Now we're talking smaller than a cantaloupe, and the price was $24 a melon.
In terms of taste trends, Nahabedian says that more Americans have been gravitating toward trying Middle Eastern spices, like turmeric and Afghani saffron in recent years.
They've heard about these food They've heard about these Middle Eastern spices from Iran and Syria and Israel, and maybe they can't ever go there, but they want to taste that food. So I think certainly the spice area has really been ramped up.
Susan Spungen also works in the food hospitality industry and says that more people have begun to embrace lesser-known spices and ingredients in an effort to add greater flavor to meals.
One that's, I think, the Ottolenghi effect is, everybody being much more familiar with and comfortable with sort of Middle Eastern and North African ingredients like harissa, za'atar, sumac, using a lot of creamy yogurt with our dishes, and tahini, of course. We can't forget tahini.
Spungen is a cook, food stylist, and author of the cookbook Open Kitchen, Inspired Food for Casual Gatherings. So what exactly is a food stylist? Spungen puts it as a professional that's hired to cook and make sure the food looks perfect for movies, advertising, and editorial spreads. Spungen has worked as a food stylist on several movie sets, including Julie and Julia and Eat, Pray, Love.
Working for Eat, Pray, Love had its own set of challenges because we were working really in the streets of Rome with no home base. I had like a refrigerated truck that I kept my stuff in, but the streets of Rome are tiny, so we didn't have like a big food truck that I could work from. Generally, the locations department would rent a restaurant where we'd be shooting out of for the day, and I'd have to jump into some restaurant kitchen that I'd never been in before and just start cooking. That would just give you a little taste of how it could be. And also, like, fighting crowds who were there to see Julia Roberts in the streets of Rome, and you're carrying food across, like, a piazza. It was crazy.
Through her diverse career, Spungen has perfected how to create meals that appeal to a wide palate and get people thinking differently about creative flavor combinations, like flan infused with chamomile for dessert.
I just really always strive, whether it's a sweet, which you mentioned a sweet, or a savory dish, just to maximize the flavors of the food that I make and maybe give it like a little bit of a twist where someone's not quite sure what it is they're tasting, but they like it. Like, for instance, the flan, it's a very neutral flavored dish, but I just thought, what flavor could I add to this to kind of almost enhance or deepen the flavor that's already there? And I thought about chamomile tea, and honestly, it's not an unusual ingredient. You can buy chamomile tea in any supermarket, right? So it's just you might not have thought of using it in a dessert, but it's a lovely combination. And I think also I'm just always trying to think not to be different for the sake of being different, but what would make it perhaps more interesting or different than maybe something you've had before.
Spungen also finds joy in cooking the unloved vegetables that most people tend to avoid.
There's a lot of vegetables that people, I think, have these preconceived notions about or biases against, and they think they don't like them, whether it's beets or eggplant or Brussels sprouts. I think a lot of people have realized, oh, those are pretty good when you roast them. But I think so much of that is based on maybe having them badly prepared at some point in their life, and then they're not really willing to try it again. I can't tell you how many people I've served beets to over the years that say, I don't like beets, and then they eat them. They're like, oh, these are really good. Or the same with eggplant. The texture can be kind of wrong if you cook it wrong, but if you cook it right, it's delicious.
Whether you're experimenting at home or looking forward to the next time you can go out for a nice meal again, think differently about each ingredient on your plate. Where did it come from? How much time was put into making it? What flavors could it pair well with? To find out more about this topic, our guests Carrie Nahabedian and Susan Spungen, visit viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zverin. I'm Gary Price. Coming up on Viewpoints.
When you are coming from a different demographic and you are a minority, it could be very challenging for you to actually succeed in the industry.
The changing face of construction in the U.S. Then,
it took about 3 hours of labor in Latin America to produce a pound of coffee.
The complicated rise of coffee. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.